The life of Daniel W. Perry, both at home and in the military. Daniel was born in March of 1844. He grew up in the small town of South Londonderry, Vermont. Daniel's parents, William and Rhoda Perry, were wealthy and successful farmers. Before he was enlisted for the Civil War, Daniel worked as a farm laborer on his parents' farm. He had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. The boys were called Hemmon, Charles, and Linville. The girls were Estella and Dora. Daniel and his siblings all would have been educated at School No. 12 on School Street in South Londonderry. They would have gotten groceries and mailed letters at the store on the corner of North Street and Church Street. There is still a store in the same place today. There are a few churches that the family could have worshipped at, but I think the most likely possibility is that they attended Union Church, which was situated just across the road from the Perry residence. Daniel's oldest brother, Hemmon Perry, was born in February 1847 and died 15 years later, on September 8, 1862. Although I do not know why he died, I can guess that it was due to disease, because that was the most common cause of death in the mid-1800s. Charles, Linville, and Dora were 14, 6, and almost 1 when they died in December of 1863. The most likely reason for their death is also an illness that spread throughout the family. Daniel volunteered to go into combat in the Civil War. He was not drafted. He fought for the Union Army in the 16th Vermont Infantry, Company D. He fought in one battle at Fairfax Courthouse on December 28, 1862. Life in the Civil War was very difficult. The soldiers lived in tents that were made for 12 men. Despite this, the Army often assigned 20 to each tent. This meant that they were uncomfortably full. Rainy days were the worst for the soldiers. The tent flaps had to be buttoned shut, enclosing all of the foul odors of the men in one small space. When soldiers were not in battle, which was usually about 3/4 of the time, they lived in camp and drilled almost all day so as to be ready when they finally got into a combat situation. When they weren't drilling, the soldiers could be found cleaning or working to improve camp conditions. In the beginning of the war, soldiers were well fed and had lots of clean water. As the war progressed, the food and drink grew less ideal. One thing that the soldiers considered to be a staple ingredient for camp life was coffee. Luckily for Daniel, it was plentiful for the Union Army. The Confederates were not so lucky, and sometimes were forced to concoct substitutes from any number of things, including peanuts, potatoes, and peas. While Daniel was not in the Army for very long, he would have still spent almost 2 months in a camp like this. 3 days after his only battle, Daniel died of a disease at age 18 years and 9 months. It is unknown what disease actually killed Daniel. His infantry was in combat in the early winter. During that time, the camp conditions were especially bad. There was a great lack of blankets and warm clothes for the soldiers. Also, the cramped conditions made it easy for disease to spread. Vermont troops suffered a great deal from disease and illness. The reason for this is a mystery. According to a camp surgeon general of the time, homesickness could have played a part. The more current theory is that because many of the Vermont men had led sheltered lives in secluded areas, they had not developed the immunities that city boys would have from growing up with so many people around. Some common diseases of the time were mumps, whooping cough, chicken pox, and typhoid fever. It is very likely that Daniel died from one of these. While the camp conditions did improve quite a bit by midwinter, it was too late for many soldiers, including Daniel Perry. By 1864, William and Rhoda Perry were left with only one daughter, Estella. She grew up and became Estella V. Bryant, married to Charles V. Bryant. William and Rhoda lived with the Bryant family until they passed away. Rhoda in 1877 at the age of 59, and William in 1882 at the age of 71. Both of them lived well above the average lifespan of the time, proving that the family did not have all bad luck. Estella and Charles had 2 children, George and Gertie Bryant. Charles supported the family by making harnesses for horses, while Estella stayed home and looked after the children. By 1920, Estella is a widow living with her son George, who never got married. The story of Daniel W. Perry and his immediate family ends with the death of his sister Estella, sometime between 1920 and 1930.